Hey guys, I'm right back with you here on YouTube. I'm saddened by that. I'm so saddened by what we are going through, but I pray with all my heart and soul, y'all, that this is going to lead us to a better world. It has to. That's what I believe. And that's where I'm going to stand. Okay? So when we do these shows on Wednesdays and we have joy, truly know I'm aware of what is going on. And we will be aware. We will be ready in any way we need to be. And we may take moments to be upset, but we're not going to spend our whole time being upset, because that does nothing but block blessings and also blocks us as to what we can do to move the needle forward in a more positive way. Okay. So with that, in this week, we have lost, my industry, the entertainment industry has lost 3 wonderful people, and I really just want to mention them. Hey there, Mooncrat. Hey, everybody on YouTube. I'm sorry we ended up coming in a little late, but we're here. Dean Irby was an amazing man. He was an actor, a brilliant director. He was also a professor. And I want to find out right now, where was it that I have? He was a professor at State University of New York at Purchase College. I met Dean Irby when I first moved to New York. And I said to him, Dean, I'm having a party and I'm barbecuing. He said, well, barbecuing? Because he knew in New York you have an apartment. He said, where are you going to barbecue? I said, I'm going to barbecue where I live. He said, you can't barbecue. He came over to my home that was full of people, smelled fresh barbecue. I had put a barbecue grill on the fire escape. And I was barbecuing like every LA girl does. He was a laugh, a wonderful person. And we will miss Dean Irby. And Judy Pace, she was just amazing. She was 84, I believe it was, before she passed away. Look at this gorgeous, gorgeous woman. Judy was an actress. She was on Peyton Place. She was also in Brian's song with Billy D and James Caan. She was just fantastic, and you can see them right here. She was a wonderful woman, and we're going to miss her. And the one that just left us a few days ago, Kiki Fabulous Shepherd. Kiki was a co-host on Showtime at the Apollo. Kiki was a dancer. Kiki was a wonderful aunt, mother, friend, sister. She had a fantastic foundation called the KISS Foundation, Inc. Right there is Kiki's foundation information. Write it down, you guys. Let's make this foundation wealthier than it was even when Kiki was here. It's so important that we acknowledge the ones who we love. We acknowledge people in our lives. So with that being said, I have a fantastic guest this week. Oh, I'm so excited. She's so incredible. And you know, I can give you her resume, but you know, I'm going to do it the way I like to do it. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Johnnson-Alfano. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you so much for that wonderful video. I'm like, "Oh, who's that girl?"
She's someone you want to know, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
And she is you. You and I met at the Hollywood honoring of Black History Month with all of these beautiful costumes. If you guys have not been to the Hollywood Museum, it is just magnificent. And Nikki was there. She spoke, and I was so taken with her story and who she is that I asked her right then, please, can I get in touch with you to be on the show? And that's how she's here with us today.
And I was so honored to be such a part of this history, especially Black history. And, you know, I went there just honored to be asked. And, honestly, I was the least famous person there, but they had featured my gown from when I was Miss Universe and my crown and my sash. And it felt like a full circle moment
Mhm.
because that gown I wore to a speaking engagement, my last speaking engagement as Miss Universe 2021, 2022. And that was in San Diego for Doors of Change, which is a organization that provides education to homeless teenagers. And that is where my family had experienced homelessness. So I got to come back decades later as Miss Universe, sharing my story, raising money and
Ah,
awareness about the issue of homelessness, and really wanting to use my story and my achievements as, what's possible for people.
and that is one of the reasons why I wanted you here. So let's go back. How, where do you come from? Tell us your background.
So this what I'm about to say to you different is a little bit of a different story than I would have said even 5 years ago
Mhm.
because some things kind of came up. But I was born originally in Detroit, Michigan. My grandmother, like a lot of Black folks, made the Great Migration north. She was born in Mississippi to sharecroppers, and she wanted a better life. And she moved to Detroit. She had 5 children, and before I was even born, 2 of my uncles were murdered on the streets of Detroit. One was stabbed to death, and then the other was he was shot when he was 14 years old outside of a convenience store, and he ended up dying at 19 from complications, really paralyzed, and he died of pneumonia. And so those are the circumstances I was born into. My mom was a single mom. Her and my dad broke up when I was about 2 years old. My grandmother worked as a domestic for wealthy white families in the suburbs of Detroit. And, she made sure that we had like a decent quality of life. But when I was about 4 years old, my grandmother was injured in a bus accident. And so she couldn't work. The
Mhm.
one positive that came out of that is she got a small settlement and she used that money to move our family out of Detroit. My mom had fallen into drugs and alcohol, and I think she was hoping to get her out of that environment. And so we ended up moving to Santa Barbara, actually, California. But it was an area that was way too expensive for us. And my mom and my grandmother had a little bit of a falling out, and my mom took me and my younger brother Michael, and she moved us to San Diego. And within a week of us moving there, she met a man, and he took all of our money. And so we went from living in a hotel to living in a motel to people being kind enough to let us stay in a guest room on their sofa on a floor until we ran out of places to stay. And that's how we ended up in the shelter system. And so we would stand in line, and some days we would be able to get housing, but there wasn't a lot of housing for women and children because people didn't really think of homelessness as being an issue that happened with women and children.
Mhm.
And the nights that we couldn't get a place to stay, my mom would find a park bench and she would try to stay up all night, and she would have me sleep on one knee and my brother sleep on another. And after several months, someone became aware that we were homeless and took us away from my mom, and my brother and I were put into separate foster homes. I don't know how my mom was able to get us back, but she was. And she just realized that she just couldn't provide a stable household. So the decision was made for me to go and live back with my grandmother. But my grandmother could only take one of us because of my grandmother's disability. She was living in Section 8 housing for senior citizens. And so she took me purely because I was a girl. And my younger brother was put into foster care. And I lived with my brother and mother together again as an intact family. One of the reasons that I am who I am is because of my grandmother, though, because at that point, I was about 10 years old. So we'd been homeless on the streets for several months between the ages of 9 and 10. I get put on a Greyhound bus by myself. And I remember getting to my grandmother very late. My grandmother made sure I was okay, and then she looked at me and she said, "Nikki, you're fortunate enough to be born in a different America than the America I was born into. To the greatest generation of women that have ever lived. What are you going to do with it?" And I looked at her and I was like, I didn't know I was 10 years old. And then I thought about it and I said, I want to be a lawyer and I want to have lots of shoes. And the reason that I said I wanted to be a lawyer is because I felt voiceless. I felt like things were happening to my family and no one cared, and that there was no one to speak for us. And I don't think that I fully understood what lawyers did, but I did understand that they had a voice and that especially Black lawyers could use their voice for good. And that's what I wanted to do. The other reason that I said I wanted to have a lot of shoes, and I do love a good shoe, is because when we were in one of the homeless shelters, the one pair of shoes that I had that fit, we lost one of them. And they gave me a pair of shoes that didn't quite fit. And I learned a really important lesson from that, which is when people are in need, they are grateful to get help. But what's really important is to give them the things that they need, the things that, because that felt empowering to me. And my grandmother really helped me to believe that with a good education, anything would be possible. And she really was my greatest advocate and my first advocate, because when I had been out of school for all of that time, the school wanted to hold me back. And my grandmother advocated for me and said, "No, this girl is smart. You're not going to hold her back. I need you to test her." And when they tested me, I tested gifted in math and English. And instead of having the label placed on me as being a homeless kid, the label was placed on me that I was a gifted kid. And I don't know that I was gifted, but it was enough for the school to see me differently. And I think more importantly, for me to see myself differently, for education to be my way out. And that was a dream that I had as a kid. And it's my greatest achievement for me to be able to say that I am a tax lawyer in Philadelphia. I have my own law firm and I have been practicing law for the last 20 years.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic. So many people will think, oh, they've said no to me. I'm not going to be able to do what I wanted to do. There's so many people who think, oh, I come from minimal means, if anything. I'm not going to be able to achieve. And here you are telling us that you had quite a roller coaster before you were even 10 years old. And look what you have achieved. It's just amazing. And you go around the world speaking, don't you?
I do. I've been really lucky. I mean, to be honest, I have been surprised that people have really engaged with my story, but I think why they engage in my with my story is because I think for many people, especially within our community, it feels like a very familiar story. A lot of us have been raised by our grandmothers or our aunties or people who really invested in me. And here's the thing. I want people to take from my story that things are possible, but
Mm,
this isn't just a pull yourself up by your bootstraps story. It was a lot of people sacrificed along the way. A lot of people poured into me when I didn't see what I was capable of. And so when I tell my story, yes, I had to be in a place of accepting the help, but it was very important for me to get the help. And it wasn't just the help from my grandmother, but one of the things that I advocate for is the importance of the social safety net, the importance of welfare and food stamps and good, safe schools and healthcare. I mean, those things are so important. I needed those things. I needed a place that I could go and safely be with my grandmother. And we needed that from the taxpayers. And I remember being so young, and we would go to the grocery store, and I say I'm old school poor because it was like when the food stamps were like colored money. And I would be so embarrassed when my grandmother would pay, and I try to run away, and she wouldn't let me run away. She would say, don't feel bad for needing help. She's like, remember what this feels like. And when you get older, make better choices so that you're not necessarily in this situation. But she's like, take advantage of the help that you're being given. That's how you can show that you have gratitude for it. Like, you need food, we need a roof over our heads, but go to school and get yourself a good education so that you're not reliant upon it. And I feel really grateful that I don't have to be reliant upon it now, but I also feel like it's an obligation for me now as a taxpayer to pay back into the system, financially. I also make sure that I'm, giving to charities that are important to me, but I also give my time. I mentor a lot of young people, and I also go into shelters and schools, and I share my story, because the difference between me and someone that I'm talking to in a shelter many times is just time. I had enough time, but it wasn't an easy story, because I would be remiss in saying, well, I'm a lawyer, but I also have to tell you the part of the story where I got a scholarship to college, and I came to school and I failed out after my first year of college. And I remember calling my grandmother and telling her I'd been kicked out of school. And my grandmother said, I love you. You have everything you need to be able to succeed. But I had aged out of the system, and she just couldn't afford for me to come back for her to take care of me. And so I had to make it work. And I was really blessed. I ended up answering an ad in a local newspaper for a live-in nanny position for a Jewish family of lawyers. And they took me in.
Wow.
They took me in. And the father was a law professor at Villanova University, and the mother was head of the ACLU, and their son Ben was 3, and I would take care of him from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. And one day I said, I really want to go back to school. And the father really said to me, he's like, you really should. He said, you're as smart as any of my students. And they said, if you can get back into school, we will be home by every night by 6 o'clock so you can go to night school. And the school I failed out of, St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, took me back in the night school program. I lost my scholarship, had to start from scratch, but start back, did go back to the same school I failed out of, and then went on to graduate. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without them believing in me and them being willing to change their life for me. And so it's also important for people who aren't necessarily in need, but you're coming into contact, especially with young people, be that helping hand, be that positive word to them. And it might not even be someone that's in your family. It could be somebody who lives on your block. It could be somebody who goes to your church. I mean, so many people poured into me and spoke life into me when I failed and I needed multiple chances. And that's the thing. Like, this isn't an after school special. Like, it took 2 or 3 times falling and bumping my head to be able to get to be who I am. And so I think that's an important part of the conversation, especially when you're dealing with trying to end generational trauma, generational poverty. You're trying to do something very different than maybe anybody else as in your family has done. And they want you to succeed, but they may not be able to help you or give you the direction that you can to succeed. So sometimes you need that help from people that are outside of your family.
Mm.
And just the willingness to speak life into others, I think, is so important.
Yes, I love what you're saying because it isn't that people came to assist you just because, even though it's just because you're cute or they liked you, it's because they saw you working, they saw you trying, they saw you making an effort. They understood you more by your conversation, by the way you behave. And I think that's so important because sometimes people are looking for a handout, but you have to do something in order for that energy to get outside of you to attract to you the people who are going to help you. It's not about
It's
right?
No, I absolutely agree, but I think it's hard when you're coming from an environment. I think what people don't always understand about poverty is poverty feels like it makes you feel like no matter what you do, it isn't going to change anything around you. And getting out of that mindset takes time. And the way I kind of try to describe it is you just kind of have to put one foot in front of the other. It's doing something, it's not doing everything. So when I got kicked out of college and went back, I didn't put all this pressure of myself about like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to do all of this. It really was, okay, I've got to go talk to my school and see if I can get back in. Then I've got to figure out, can I get financial aid? Then can I figure out, can I take classes at night so that I can keep my job that gives me a place to live? And I started like looking at my life week by week. And then as I started getting those small wins, then I could start thinking about the next month or the next quarter or the next year. And I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves, or you just don't have the framework that you don't do anything. You get like paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that I want to say to people is just take that first step. And even if you fall back, try again. A lot of things don't happen the first time. And I think the more complicated your family situation, the more times you might have to try. And I think there's not enough conversation around that because, I've taught at the community college level and I've seen this issue kind of with my students sometimes is they get so overwhelmed, and if they can't do it perfectly, they don't try. And we really have to kind of start having these conversations that when you're trying to change your entire family's trajectory, you're trying to change your life. Yeah, it's going to be hard. And sometimes it feels like the world is, I don't know, like is going against you. It's like you'll decide you're going to go back to college or you'll try to go back to school and your car will stop working.
Mm-hmm.
And people see that as a sign that maybe they shouldn't do it. It's a sign you should be doing it.
Absolutely.
But when you're trying to break generational curses, the devil will try to hold you back, and you got to keep going. You got to keep going. And I hope that what people take from stories like mine is that it is possible and that I'm not special from them. I just had help, and that they are going to come into contact with people that want to help them too, and that they have to trust enough in themselves to be able to take that helping hand and move forward.
Hmm. I agree. I agree with you, and maybe I didn't say it right, but I think that what you're saying, and tell me if I'm not in that understanding, is that you still have to do things. It may not be a
Yeah.
lot, but you still don't give up on yourself because even when I didn't grow up poor, and I had both of my parents. But even through that, I still got no's and I fell on my ass and I did something wrong. I said something wrong. I was in the wrong place. I didn't connect with the right. I did all of that stuff happens. But we just have to, like you said, put one foot in front of the other. It's not the whole enchilada. It's just what's that one thing I can do today? And I think
No
from
one's going to save you. No one's going to come save you. You
no
have
one's
to
going to
save
say
yourself.
exactly, exactly. And I also think that from doing those things, then you create the energy that gets put out there for someone to look at you in the moment and say, "Hey, you need help. I've got something to give to you." But we have to try is a word that I don't like. So I think what it would turn into what I would say is it's doing just something every day or every moment of the day and knowing that you may not win, but can you win just a little bit here and there and just keep going, right?
And that's where and here's the thing,
Mm.
you get more confident. You're like,
Mhm.
because sometimes you'll do something and it wasn't nearly as hard as you thought it was. And you're like, oh, look at me. Look at what I did. And then you try something that's a little bit harder. And you know what? You're right. I don't like the word try. I just do.
Mm.
Um, I do. And I do a little bit because in the thinking of trying to do everything, people do nothing.
Yes, yes, right.
And just do a little something. It's, you're not going to start running a marathon. You got to learn how to walk, you learn how to crawl, and then
Mm.
you got to learn how to walk. But a lot of us also are fortunate enough we have somebody in our life. We have a teacher,
Mhm.
we have a
A
family friend,
grandmother.
a grandma, a play auntie. Most of us have been fortunate enough to come across that person that just makes you feel they see something in you. And what I want to say is lean into that
Mm.
because that is special. And a lot of times too many of us, we spend too much time on what we didn't have, on what our parents didn't do, couldn't do, and we don't put enough energy into the people who can and do for us. And I'm not making light of it. I've struggled a lot with my relationship or lack of relationship with my parents, but that's also but I also learned a lot about that journey when I made my documentary. And that's why I said, how I tell you the story of me is how I've been telling it for the last few years. And then probably 5 years ago, I learned the rest of the story that was missing. And it gave me such a different context for my life. Do you mind if I go back a little bit?
Okay, now wait a second. Before you do that, I have a piece of your documentary. So do you want to tell us the story before I show it?
No, show the documentary. That would
Okay.
be great.
Okay, so Nikki has created this brilliant documentary. And in her documentary, let me see. I'm just going to show you just about the first minute, 2 minutes of it. But I wanted you to see this because it's wonderful.
All of us have moments in our lives. It's a day that I cannot forget. When I came there and saw them, it was traumatizing.
And before you go on, I want to show this. So this was the last shot that you saw.
That's me.
Tell us about your
It's
documentary, my dear.
it's the story that I didn't know. So, just to give your viewers the context of what they just saw, um, The Kahiki restaurant was a special occasion Polynesian restaurant in Columbus, Ohio. That particular night, two young couples, my mom and my dad, my uncle and his girlfriend, and it turns out me, were there to celebrate my uncle's birthday. There was a bill dispute about an extra bottle of wine that was put on the tab, and the bill went to $98. The police were called, and as the police got there, my uncle said, forget it, and just paid the bill. He just wasn't going to argue. Um, on the way out, my mother was holding me, and she bumped into one of the police officers. And the police officer, based on the reports, raised his stick to hit my mother and knocked me out of her arms, and my dad caught me. And as you can imagine, it started a melee. My uncle and my dad jumped in because my mom was 21, 22 years old and weighed about 110 pounds, if that. The police, a call was made from the restaurant saying police were in trouble. They sent the SWAT team and 7 police cars. They were beaten. My uncle's girlfriend was allowed to take me, thank gosh. But they were beaten, thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, and a white plumber saw this and called into the black radio station, which had a young DJ by Les Brown. And many people may know Les Brown, who's gone on to become like a world famous motivational speaker. Mm-hmm. It ended up causing people started protesting. It was one of the first times in Ohio that police officers were fired for police brutality because this white guy saw it and spoke up against it. And he actually filed police brutality charges against the police officers. And the documentary follows what happened during that time, but also follows my life afterwards. So all the things I told you about, like being homeless and my mother's drug addiction and my parents breaking up, this was the missing piece that I never really knew happened. I knew something had happened when I was in Ohio. I certainly didn't know I was there. I didn't know the extent of it. And my biological father, who left when I was 2 and I only met once as an adult, he died in 2020, and my mom died in 2021. And in 2021, if everyone kind of remembers what was going on in the country, we were still in the grips of COVID, but more importantly, we were dealing with the aftermath of George Floyd. And so after my dad died, I ended up meeting my stepmom and making a relationship with my stepmom, who still lives in Columbus. And my family originally wasn't from there. We were from Detroit. Mm-hmm. She sends me this magazine article called Being Black in Columbus. And I was like, okay, this looks interesting. And I'm flipping through it, and the pictures that you see are in this article. So both of my parents are gone, and I'm reading about this thing that happened to them. And then I find out that I'm there that night. Wow. It's shocking. And the only person that's still alive that was from that night besides me was my uncle, who I was very, very close to. And so I call him up, and he talks to me about it for the first time in all of these years. And I decide, a couple of years go by, and I'm like, I've got to do something with this. I think I'm going to make a movie, which, I'm a tax lawyer, so I have no background in making movies, but I knew this young, talented Black woman director. She actually did the videography for my wedding in 2022, and she made documentaries. So God put her in my life for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I sent her the article, and I said, would you want to make this film with me? And she said, absolutely. We reached out to the person who had written the article, because in the article they said my dad had passed away and that they never knew what happened with my family. And so I called them up and I said, I was the baby there. And I'm 51 years old now, and I was like 48 then. And he's like, "Are you really?" So I sent him pictures like with my mom and everything so I could prove who I was. And he connected me to Les Brown. And so I called Les Brown and I said, "Were you the Les Brown that was a DJ during the Kahiki and you marched?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I was the baby." And he like got so choked up because he never knew what happened to us. And so I spent the last 2 years making the Kahiki 3 and Me. And in that process, I got a chance to learn more of my history, learn more about my parents,
Mm.
learn grace and empathy for them. And the audience gets to go with me on this journey. The film premiered January 31st at the Denton Black Film Festival. And we won, we were top 3 best documentary feature, and we won best honorable mention for my first film. And we've won a couple of other documentary best features, best mentions at other film festivals. And I have a surprise that I haven't told anybody that I just found out last night. So it is breaking news. Just found out we got into the Columbus Film Festival. So
Oh, fabulous.
the film in the city where
Mm.
this incident happened. And it feels like a full circle moment that I get to tell my family story. It was very important to me. I think especially as an attorney, the fact that I get to say that you did not break us, you did not break my family. It did a lot of damage to us, but I get to come back as an attorney and you get to hear what this meant. And I made us the heroes of the story. It wasn't what was done to us, it was what we overcame and the lessons that we learned.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Not only are you coming back as an attorney, you're coming back as Miss Pennsylvania, right? And you're coming back as Miss Universe, and you're coming back as this incredible attorney. I just love that. Um, Going back to it, I also want to say right here, you've got your, here we go.
My team.
There's your team. Yes, and that's your director, your DP.
It's
Tell us who's here.
Yes. So the young lady next to me, Amber Monet, she is my very talented director. Eli is our cinematographer. He's got the beard. The taller gentleman with the glasses and with the dreadlocks is my makeup artist, Ira Anthony. He makes me look fabulous. And John Wesley Photography. He takes all the photos and kind of keeps it all together and helps with everything. It was really important to me that this be a diverse team.
Mm-hmm.
It was important to me. I funded the movie out of my own pocket, and it was really important to me that I got to make sure that I got to control that narrative and that the movie was as true as I could make it. I tried to be very thoughtful about the fact that I was speaking for people that couldn't speak for themselves, that they were no longer here, and that they had chosen not to have those conversations. My mom had not had that conversation with me. It was something she was very traumatized by. It was something she still bore the scars from. She still had really terrible migraines from it. And what I found out in the movie is that not only were the police, in the making of the movie, was not only were the police reinstated after the fact, but then my mother, my uncle, and my father were put on trial for resisting arrest.
Oh my God.
And my mom was sentenced, she got the harshest sentence, and she was sentenced to 6 months in prison.
Oh,
And in the research of it and going back and finding the newspaper articles, I'm looking at the dates and I realized during the trial that she was pregnant with my brother. And when I found a newspaper article that referenced the fact that during the first day of trial, she had to be removed from the courtroom because they thought she was having a miscarriage.
It gives understanding to your mother's drug problem.
Absolutely.
It gives
And
understanding to your parents breaking up with something like that. That's so hard. How do you deal with that? I'm I'm so sorry to hear that, but what I am thrilled about is what you overcame. It's about what you overcame. So you're not letting that story define you. And I know in my heart that your parents' souls are gratified by that. They are eased. They are even more at peace knowing that you're okay. How is your brother? Are you connected at all?
so this is the hard part. Um,
Yeah.
so when my when I went to live with my grandmother, my brother was put into foster care. At one point, my grandmother got very sick, and they sent me to live with my mom and my stepdad, who she met when she was um, when we needed to go, to food kitchens and get food. Um, it just didn't take. My brother really struggled, and so when I failed out of college, I lost contact with him for 11 years, and he was able to find me my last semester of law school. Turned out that he was working in Hollywood. He was working on the set of the television show Frasier. He was moving scenery around. Um, but when I went out there to see him for my last spring break, that show was ending, and it turned out that my brother had HIV and was addicted to meth. He struggled for the next few years, and in 2010, he
Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. We're going to know that her Wi Fi is going to come back. And I do find it interesting that this is where the Wi Fi would start to go out. Nikki, if you can hear me, my darling, you're frozen. If you'd like, you can go back out because it hasn't unfroze. You're not unfrozen. If you want to go back out, come back in and I'll bring you back onto the show. Nikki, can you hear me, my love? Okay, I'm going to take Nikki out and we're going to wait for her to come back. I'm telling you, you guys. There's beautiful her. Okay.
see me.
Sweetheart, yeah, good. I'm glad you're back. You hit frozen, so
I know. I saw you froze for me. I never stopped being able to see you or hear you, but
okay.
you couldn't see or hear me.
Okay.
So where did I
What
freeze?
happened to your brother, my dear?
Um,
He was
so
addicted
we
to meth.
were he was addicted to meth, and he struggled for the next few years, and then in 2010 he hung himself in court ordered rehab. Um, and as you can imagine, that was incredibly difficult because he didn't pass away right away. He was put on life support, and I had to fly out to California um, and take him off life support. But what that did for me is I what it did for me is it really solidified for me the importance of the advocacy work that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
That I felt that it was important to share my story, that it was important to share his story, that people needed to understand that the difference between his outcome and my outcome was being in a household with someone who loved me, my grandmother, even though that she didn't have a lot of resources. and that if we wanted to have better outcomes, we needed to invest in people, because I feel like as a culture, we have become harder and harder on people who are living in poverty, and
Yes.
less willing to give them a hand up. So I always say it takes a lot of money and investment to create someone like me. And you can invest in housing and schooling and healthcare and mental health, or you can end up too many times end up investing in, them ending up in a pipeline where they're less healthy, where, they have mental health issues, or unfortunately, they may end up in the criminal justice system. And so the positive that came out of that was it gave me a clarity of purpose.
Mm.
Um, and I think I really struggled for a long time. And I always honestly say, like, my faith really plays a huge role in my life. But I was angry at God because I felt like I've done everything. I'm a lawyer now. You know, why am I losing everybody that I love? And I think I realized that the answer was, why not my family? Nobody's family deserves for this to happen. And maybe it happened to me because I was going to use this to speak truth to power and to use this to do some positive. Because here's the thing, my family didn't deserve it, but nobody's family deserves this.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I fortunate enough, because of my education, because some of the privilege I've garnered along the way, that I feel like I've earned, but privilege nonetheless, that I get to be in rooms and spaces who maybe with people who get to make decisions, but have not been exposed to people who've had my life experiences. And to be able to say, this isn't just about people working hard. This is about people needing opportunities, and what
Right.
are we willing to do as a society to help them?
Right.
Because I didn't get here by myself. It wasn't just because of my grandmother. It was because I got to go to a public school that had a gifted program for me to be put into,
Mm.
because my grandmother, had Section 8 housing. It was for senior citizens, but it was a place that I could go and be with her and be safe. She was disabled. She needed money to be able to take care of me. Those things were important. And so I think by telling this story, this documentary, the viewer kind of goes on this journey with me, but it also allows them to find out, to find out what this felt like, and to go along with me as I'm learning these truths. And it provides much more richer context to my family, that they did the best that they could. It wasn't always what I needed, but I don't know that they necessarily had the skills. And when I think about how young my parents were, and they were in the middle of the civil rights incident, and they couldn't even keep their baby safe, how disempowering that must have felt to them.
Yes. Yes. How disempowering. It costs more money to put people in rehab, in jail, and keep them there than it does to help give them to give them an education. If we
In a
get
good
good, in a good way, yeah, give them an education, even if there are troubles at home, and this is how we raise people to understand how to love others. If they love themselves, that is so important. If you don't love yourself, you can't give love to anyone else. I can tell this story. Todd Bridges, I was going to direct and write his one man show. And he was wonderful actor. He was doing great, but he lived in the valley at a time, and he had a bike, and the cops were constantly taking his bike from him. He could be with his friends, who were mostly white kids in the valley at that time. They're riding and doing what kids do at 12 and 13. The cops would come and say, "You stole this bike," over and over again, and take it from him. And his mother would have to go down to the police station, get it. And they call him the N word. and they tell him he was no good, and they tell him he was a drug addict. And then at work, if something happened, they'd look at the black kid, and it wouldn't. And he said it was never him, but at some point in his life, he said, "Eff it, if that's what you think of me, that's what I'm going to do." And it just messed up his life because he had people who were constantly in his ear with negativity. And that happens so much. Being a black man is, they are the most endangered species on the planet. And black people as a whole, we create the music people want. We create the dances, the wardrobes, everything that you want. We from the motherland. When you say the motherland is Africa, where we come from. And not only do I believe that the others need to see us as the wealth of information, of love, of creativity that we are, but we also need to see it in ourselves. We've
And
got
I
to
think that's
see it
the
in
challenge.
ourselves. It is the challenge, and we need to give it to those, because I'm with you. I can be around people who will talk about someone bad who they see on the street, but you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what they've survived. We need to give grace to each other more than what we're giving, and put money into our schools, into our communities, so that we're not walking down the street at times afraid someone's going to take something from us, because they wouldn't think that way, because now they're thinking of other things. They're thinking of science. They're thinking of other things that are happening in their lives.
But here's the thing, if people have things, they don't have to take from other people. And I think
Exactly.
and I think the thing is, most people are trying to survive. They're not looking to go out and harm other people, but it's hard to see beyond yourself when you have people that are constantly feeling a sense of deprivation.
Hmm.
They have nothing to lose. And here's the thing, I always make the argument that this is not about charity. This is about investment. This is
Hmm.
about, we are, as a country, competing with people from all over the world. And we do have, Black people are incredibly talented and innovative and gifted. And if you have parts of the population that you are unnecessarily holding down, you're actually making the country weaker.
Yes,
So
yes.
much talent, so much innovation is being lost. It's funny. In 2015, I created a smartphone app called Donify. And I had been an Eisenhower fellowship. I had won an Eisenhower fellowship to India and New Zealand. And I'd
Tell us what
gone,
the Eisenhower Fellowship is.
no, an Eisenhower fellowship is, years ago, President Eisenhower, as a birthday present, some very wealthy men created this fellowship to fund people all over the world. It started out as Americans and it started out as men who had different ideas, and they'll fund your idea and you'll go for periods of time to different countries to learn more about it and then bring that idea back to the United States.
Mm.
So, of course, my idea was related to ending generational poverty. I went to India, I went to New Zealand, I shared my story, I studied, different innovative programs, and I came back and I created a smartphone app called Donify. And it allowed people in need to be able to use their smartphone to call, like there's a 24-hour outreach team to call if they needed help. And it allowed people, regular citizens, if you didn't feel comfortable giving someone in need money, but you wanted to help, it allowed you to donate on your phone, or it allowed you to call the outreach team and said, hey, I see somebody at 15th and Market. They don't have shoes. They look like they're hungry. And it would allow your phone to geolocate and show you nearby nonprofits, if you, what you needed to do to get food from them, to get shelter from them. And I used all of my experiences. And it was in existence for about 5 years. And I always use that as an example of, look what I was able to do and look what I was able to create that helped hundreds of people. And not only did we use it for regular people in the streets, but I ended up partnering with the public defender's office, because what we were finding is that there were people who were being held in custody for misdemeanors longer because they didn't have a place to go, and the judge wouldn't let them just go and be out on the streets. So they were being held in
Oh,
custody. And so we partnered with the Defender Association so public defenders could use the app in court and say, hey, there's several shelters, and they could call in real time and try to find them a place to go so that they weren't being they weren't being kept in jail. There wasn't a reason to.
mm,
So look at what I was able to do based on my experience. And how many things do we have solutions to from
mm.
people who have gone through it that we're not taking advantage of because those people are not able to get the resources that they need, the funding that they need, maybe the education that they need. And I've been able to use my education to fund the things that are important to me. I funded this app that was used in the fifth largest city in the country. I mean, that feels like a very full circle moment. And so to me, it isn't just, hey, we do this because it's the right thing. And I do think it's the right thing. I do think it's the moral thing. I do think it's what we should be doing, especially when we're saying we're the wealthiest country in the world. I think wealth is how you treat the poorest and the least among you. But it also makes sense if you are going to be competitive to
Mm-hmm.
have so much brilliance in our community, brilliance
Mm-hmm.
that isn't being funded. And, here's the thing, there are a lot of us who really are struggling, but there's a lot of us who are not struggling, that are doing wonderful, wonderful things. But not only are they not being funded, but there are things that are being done that are being put to stand in their way to
Yes,
not even be
yes.
able to achieve. So it's like, get off our backs.
Can we talk about Oklahoma when you're burning up Black Wall Street?
Exactly.
It,
The envy. So it's, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So it's, hey, they're not achieving, but then when you achieve, well, you don't deserve it, or it's DEI, or it's affirmative action.
yes,
And what's really important, and it's a lesson that my grandmother taught me, which is, what's most important is, you can't believe the good things or the bad things that people say about you. What you have to focus on is what you know to be true about yourself.
mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
she said, if you believe all of the good things,
You have to
then
look
when
at the
people
bad
say
things too.
bad things, and she's like, it matters that when you look in the mirror, that you're the kind of person that you want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
that sense of self, and the sense of self she had, she was the most elegant woman I ever knew. And she
Mm-hmm.
worked as a domestic for wealthy white people. And she was just someone who engendered respect.
Mm-hmm.
She was the kind of person, like, even white people were like, Miss Johnson, because she just was that kind of person. And to me, that is probably the greatest part of her legacy, is she always told me, even when I was that kid getting off that bus with like shoes that didn't fit, she's like, Nikki, you're destined to do something great. And even when I failed out of college, it was a faint voice, but I heard that voice, Nikki, you're destined to do something great. And I don't know if I fully believed it, but it was enough to keep that spark alive.
Right.
And I want that for all of us.
Yes, yes, me too. I'm so glad to hear your story. And there's something of what you said of investment. It's not a charity, it makes our country stronger. There are some people who now believe they need a workforce to work for them, as opposed to a workforce that works for the whole country. All these ideas that we can have, or we can work together, of all nationalities, the brains of us, what we bring from our own culture that adds. I'm I'm really moved by your story, by your grace, by your courage that you are
Thank
out
you.
there sharing with so many people of where you come from, that you can take what people would call a very difficult beginning and see it as a blessing of education for you to become who you are and for you to help others who are like you and to help those who don't understand, who have a different opinion of people who were like you. Excuse me, people who are like you were when you were younger, who are homeless. I did a film many years ago where I played a homeless woman. And being the actress that I am, I showed up on set in Pasadena in with with this ratty wig on, ratty clothes. I had eaten Chinese food the day before, so I put it in a bag and I was eating out of a bag. And I had to park 5 blocks away on the ninth floor of a parking structure. And it was on a Saturday we were shooting it. It was Friday night, rather, was the first shoot. So I had to walk through. And it was fascinating to me at the way the men looked at me like poor baby, and the women looked at me like I was dirt beneath their feet. Came to the set, and there was a bank nearby. The security guard came over and told me I had to go. And he was so unkind. And I had a moment of understanding through that whole weekend of how people can feel when they are not seen. Two little girls came over to me to give me money, and I said, "Baby, I'm not homeless. I'm an actress." And they said, "Here's some money." It helped to change my thinking of people who are in that position. Therefore, before the grace of God go I. We need to be more compassionate with people. Are you frozen again, dear Nikki? Shake your head if you can. I'm going to take you out and I'm going to stay right here. Come back in, honey. We need to be more compassionate with people, you guys. We've got to be more understanding, more loving, more giving. What Nikki says that I think is so important is it's not about charity. Can you hear me now? We can hear you. It's really about an investment we are making in others. Do you see how many celebrity kids are on drugs or are committing crimes or they are committing suicide? Their lives are not good. It's because they are given things they have not earned. They haven't earned the right for people to call them Master so and so or Mr. so and so, or to give them a mink coat, or to give them the next Gucci bag, to give them they haven't earned the right. And it messes with your mind when you haven't earned the right. So, this is a construct of how we educate our children that goes across the board.
But
And
I think it's also not just money. I think so many times we focus on whether somebody has money or not. Here's the
exactly.
thing the thing that's been so interesting to me as I've gotten older and moved in more affluent circles is I realized in so many ways all of the disadvantages I had, that I was incredibly rich in the idea that I had people who loved me, who saw me, who helped me to see myself.
And
And
that's what I'm saying, because so many people think because you have money, life is good. It is
and
a
it
challenge.
Well, and here's the thing, it still requires success in life still requires certain things there's first of all, regardless of who it is, it requires a certain amount of luck. Just luck or blessings, however you want to call it. It also requires a good amount of like good decision making,
Mhm.
and you can have like the most you can come from great wealth, but if you haven't made good decisions or you haven't felt like you've got the right emotional support, it isn't going to get you there, and it certainly isn't going to keep you there.
That's
And
right.
so
That's right.
people I know who grew up with much more wealth and status, but I was wealthier in the sense
Hmm.
of self and self-esteem, because what my grandma wasn't going to do is have me walking around in this world not knowing exactly who I was.
Hmm.
I'm exactly who I think I am. And I got that from Ann Johnson because she understood and she helped me to understand that no matter how difficult my life was, I'm coming at a different time because, yes, I could be all of these things, smart, attractive, all of those things. But there were generations of Black people and Black women that had all of those qualities and more that came before me, and they weren't in a place to be able to achieve it, and it wasn't because they were lacking in those characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the reason that I was so honored to be included was because my life is possible because of the sacrifices and the things that the previous generation didn't have.
Yes. I know my
And I
mother
think,
was part of that. My parents were part of that too. They didn't have it. And that's what I am saying, that money ain't gonna solve everything. It's
no.
about the love you get. It's about the attention you get to help you develop yourself as a person, for you to love yourself, for you to know yourself, for you to feel powerful in who you are. It's not about that. Too many times, the reason why I say that is so that those don't say, "Oh, they've got money." Oh, well, no, money. It's wonderful to have money. It's wonderful to have as many shoes as you want. It's wonderful to do it, but that is not going to bring you the happiness or the knowing of self that you need. I'm so glad that you got that from Miss Ann Johnson.
Miss Ann Johnson. And I want people to know my family's name. I want people to know their story, because their story is just representative of millions of other people's stories. And by knowing them, by maybe knowing me,
Mm,
maybe the next time you walk past somebody who's homeless, maybe you come across somebody in your life who's struggling, maybe you'll just think that second or third time. And the thing that's important is, look, you can't fix it for somebody else. But what I do say, and I learned from what I went through, especially with my brother, is leave the door open. Sometimes people are not in a space where they can hear what they need to hear.
mm-hmm,
But I've literally shared that story with people, and I've had people call me 6 months later and they're like, I'm ready now.
mm-hmm.
And what I've worked hard to do is to be in a place to receive them when they're ready. Because when I'm ready to help is not necessarily the time
That's right.
people accept that help. And so I had to get past my own ego and be like, well, I'm trying to help them. Okay, but if I really am trying to help someone, it's helping them when they can really hear that space and saying, look, you're not ready now, but when you are, I'll be here for you.
Mm-hmm. You lead a
Just
horse to
holding,
water, but you can't make them drink.
yeah, but you know what? When they are having the water available and just kind of understanding that those things kind of have to work all together, because there were times that I wasn't necessarily in the best place to be able to receive things. And I was just lucky that somebody else saw it or that I got enough time. And it's not necessarily a straight line. Success is not necessarily a straight line.
It is
And I think
not
that
a straight line
for anyone, for
for
anyone,
anyone. That's right. That's right. And so many times we talk about a lot on this show is the no's are sometimes the blessings.
yes.
One of our guests said, and it's so true. Sometimes that's God's way. I'm a Buddhist, but I'll use that anyway. It's God's way of protecting you from something that is not really for you. And within every no I have found, or within every transgression, or within every mistake, or within every failure of something, I have found something that makes me stronger, something to learn from, to move forward with, instead of being about the story of the failure, letting that be an education of what I can do better or how I can make better choices, how we can all do that. And that sounds like all of what you've done in your life, even though it's gone back and forth and back and forth, but look at who you are now. You're just amazing, an amazing
Oh,
human being.
much.
And I want to with that is to, where are you, my darling? I want you guys to see here that this is Nikki Johnnson-Alfano. This is where you can find her. And Facebook, Instagram, website, her email. This is where you know a lot of Nikki, I'm so glad you.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this conversation. It was amazing.
Great. Me too. Me too. I ask my people always before we go, and you've said so much, but I want to give you the chance to. Is there anything within your heart that you would like to say to us to inspire, to move forward? Something else that you would want to add?
Forgive yourself. You have everything you need inside of yourself. And if you're ever struggling about what to do next, go find somebody else to help, because I find that when I help others, it helps me too.
That is so wise and so good. Thank you so much for being here. Please let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
absolutely. You have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. And thank you for being with us here on The Vision is Possible.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Ciao. Thanks, Nikki. Whoo! Whoo! Did you hear that amazing woman? I I need to breathe for a second. I'm so moved by her. I'm so moved by someone who came from such a challenging beginning, who was blessed enough to have a grandmother to love up on her. That's so important, you guys. I so often go to the grocery store or I'm going to the post office and I can hear a mother yelling at her kids, stop running around, or grabbing them to calm them down because they feel shame at how their kid is acting. Or walking down the street. We all see this, walking down the street and the parent is looking at the phone and you can see the kid is bouncing around looking at their parent. They want attention and parents on the phone. Yes, we need to first love ourselves and give ourselves grace. We also need to pour that into children because they can only give what they are filled with. And if you have a child filled with love, filled with a sense of knowing themselves, look what they can achieve. Doesn't mean they'll always be successful? Hell no. Doesn't mean they're always going to ace that test? No. Doesn't mean they're always going to be the fastest runner? No. Doesn't mean they're always going to be the cutest in class, smart in class, smartest in class? No. But what it means is they can be the best them they can be. And as long as they can be the best them they can be, they may end up being the smartest one in class on that day. They may end up running fast at that in that race. Our government ain't coming for us. They're not helping us. They're actually a hindrance right now. So we've got to stick together to give to those in our family, to give grace to them, to not always being the perfect person we want, and give that grace to ourselves. And to help our children love who they are and have dreams. They may not be a lawyer. They may be working on a set just like Nikki's brother. That's wonderful. My daddy used to tell us, if you're going to be a ditch digger, you be the best ditch digger you can be. And he meant that. I'm so glad to see all of you. Let me also give this to you. This is our show info where you can find us. on The Vision is Possible. Here on Wednesdays. I'm so glad to have you guys here. And I know the show is evolving and it's changing, it's finding its way as I have it by myself now. So stick there with me. You can see all of the podcasts on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/So I love all of you. Instagram. I live in that way, you too. I'm Iona Morris Jackson. I'll see you next week on The Vision is Possible.